scripture that I'm going to read is just one portion of what Will's going to be sharing with us this morning. So I'm reading from Mark chapter 8, verses 22 to 30. Jesus and his disciples came to Bethsaida. Some people brought a blind man to Jesus and begged him to touch and heal him. Taking the blind man's hand, Jesus led him out of the village. After spitting on his eyes and laying his hands on the man, he asked him, "Do you see anything?" The man looked up and said, "I see people. They look like trees, only they're walking around." Then Jesus placed his hands on the man's eyes again. He looked with his eyes wide open. His sight was restored, and he could see everything clearly. Then Jesus sent him home, saying, "Don't go into the village." Jesus and his disciples went into the villages near Caesarea Philippi. On the way, he asked his disciples, "Who do people say that I am?" And they told him, "Some say John the Baptist, others Elijah, and still others one of the prophets." He asked them, "And what about you? Who do you say that I am?" Peter answered, "You are the Christ." Jesus ordered them not to tell anyone about him. Pastor Will, please.
Thanks, Aaron. It's a sure sign that summer is about to end when the teachers return to clean up their classrooms. So the cool air is also sending the same message. It's good to be with all of you this morning. We haven't had a train go by in the middle of the worship service for a while, it seems to me. So now some of you were at the funeral recently, but we remember what used to happen when the train would go by. There would be a scramble of little boys led by Sebastian, who's not so little anymore, to run to the window and enjoy the sight. And Jean Loby would sometimes tease me that if I ever stopped Sebastian from running to the window because I was worried it would be a distraction, he said, if you stop him, then Fred and I are going to run to the window. And so Fred and Jean are no longer with us, but I can almost picture them standing at that back window watching. So it's a beautiful little reminder this morning. I had originally kind of planned to do a long, it has been a really long sermon series on Mark, and I was going to take each little story and carefully expand on all the wisdom that was in them. But then as we sort of have an end date in mind, next week will be my last sermon here as pastor. So then I had to kind of compress things, and I really like the passage that I've chosen for next week. So I kind of crammed 3 stories into one for today. And as I was looking over them this week, I was almost regretting that I had done that, because these are beautiful stories. Each of them has wisdom and beauty and meaning in their own ways. So the first story is the story of this healing, where Jesus is doing his regular thing. He's teaching, and people bring a blind man to Jesus. And the people are begging, not the blind man, the people are begging Jesus, just touch him. Restore his sight. You can do it. It'll change his life. Just touch him. And this resonates, all of these little stories resonate, repeat themes and images of previous stories. So then Jesus agrees. Yeah, okay, I'll heal him. So he brings the man. He spits on his hand, rubs it on the man's eyes. Disciples are probably thinking, this better work, otherwise we're violating some sort of hygiene act here. But it sort of works. This is the first time Jesus does a miracle that doesn't work right away. And they ask him, can you see? And he looks, he says, yeah, I can see, but all I see is trees moving around. It doesn't quite So then Jesus does a little bit more now. What can you see? Yeah, I see everything. And there's symbolic beauty here. I could do a whole sermon on what's happening symbolically. That this man can see, sort of. And how sometimes when we are learning from Jesus, when we're working in the church, when we're living out kingdom values in our communities, we don't always get it right away. We don't always fall off our horses like Paul did on the way to Damascus. It's sometimes more gradual. Sometimes we see a little bit. We see enough to keep coming, enough to keep working, and then gradually we see more. And then we see everything. But then after the healing, Jesus tells the blind man, don't go back into the village. And there could be various reasons for this, but none of them are what the disciples would want. Don't go back into the village most certainly means don't go tell everybody, because we don't want the crowds. Keep it a secret for a little while. So then in the story that follows after this, Jesus is asking his disciples, okay, who do you say that I am? And the answer that we know and that we've seen in other stories, people list off the ideas. They think maybe you're Elijah, one of the prophets, maybe John the Baptist come back from the dead. Those are all good explanations. Those are all powerful symbols. If Jesus is carrying on the work of any of the prophets who've come before, that immediately elevates him over any of the other rabbis in the community. If Jesus is a resurrected teacher from the past, that's power, that's divine intervention. All of those are good things in their own way. But Peter goes beyond it and says, we think you're the Christ. We think you're the Messiah, the one that we are all watching for. Everyone in our society is looking around to see who's the Messiah, who's going to be the Messiah, who's going to liberate us from the oppressive Roman system. And we think you are that guy. So then Jesus says, okay, that's good. Don't tell everybody. Don't tell people about the healing of the eyes. Don't tell people that I'm the Messiah. And then the third story comes next, and I feel like if I broke these into 3 sermons, there would be a decline in how good you felt afterwards, which is maybe already true, but that's a different problem. But we have this first story where there's a good thing, but we can't tell anybody. And then another story, a great thing, but we have to keep this a secret. And then the third story is Jesus calls his disciples close and he explains to them, listen, the human one, he's talking about himself, your translations might say the Son of Man, but the human one is going to suffer. I'm going to be arrested, tortured, and killed, but I'm going to come back in 3 days. And Peter, the same one who said, Jesus, you're the Messiah, because he was right, but he just couldn't believe, he couldn't accept what Jesus had said. Again, sort of maybe like the blind man, Peter was sort of looking around and all he could see was trees, maybe. But Peter says to Jesus, that's not going to happen, Jesus. We are not going to let that happen. That can't happen. You're the Messiah. We've got a plan. We have expectations of what the Messiah is going to do. And then Jesus says, okay, Peter, you're not thinking about godly things. You're thinking about human things. Right? You're not thinking about Jesus things. You're thinking about Peter things. So, sit back. Learn. Let me open your eyes a little bit further. And then Jesus calls a bigger crowd together. And he says, if any of you want to follow me, and he's talking to his disciples and a bigger crowd around them. If you want to follow me, if you want to do my work, if you want to carry on my legacy, if you want to participate in the kingdom that I am building, each of you, every one of you, needs to pick up your cross. Carry it every day. Now, for us, a cross is a symbol. A cross is something that separates our religion from other religions. But it wasn't that when Jesus said it. He could have listed off any other execution tool, and it would have sounded gross, but when you say cross, well, then it kind of disappears into our religious language. But Jesus says, if you want to follow me, you need to pick up your lethal injection needle and carry it around with me. If you want to follow me, you need to pick up your enemy rifle and carry that. If you want to follow me, Jesus is saying, you need to understand that this life is not easy and it may even invite your own death. That's what it means, and if you can't do that, you can't follow me. It was a tough sell then, it's a tough sell now. And so this week I was kind of looking through these stories and saying, wow, this is a real bad trajectory. The disciples must be thinking, Jesus, we're trying to start a new thing here. Every time you speak, crowds gather. Every time you heal somebody, other people find out about this. And you tell us not to tell other people, but we can't help it. They certainly can't help it. The crowds are growing. They're going to make you king, Jesus. That's where this is going. And when you're the king, then Peter can be the Secretary of Defense, and James can be the Minister of Trade. They have all this in mind. This is where this is going, Jesus. What are you talking about? The cross. So all of them are holding on to these ideas. Okay, what's the symbolism of this? Because it can't be what it sounds like on the surface. And I was thinking through this, and I'm like, I gotta redeem this somehow. Or maybe not. Maybe I should just pound my fist on the pulpit and tell everybody to be ready for their own deaths. And as I was reading it, I was thinking back to a season where I would sometimes hang out in coffee shops to do writing. A while ago, I was at a book signing with Rudy Lieb, and he explained that he does most of his writing in coffee shops. And I said, I do the same thing. Sometimes in your house there are too many distractions. There are chores that need to be done, other people that want your time. But if you want to designate a time where you can focus and write, a coffee shop is a good place to do that. So that's what I sometimes do. And there are various benefits of doing this. Sometimes it's a quiet place where you can focus. There's no distractions. But sometimes there are other people that you can sort of observe. Now, some of you are like, wait a second, if I'm at a coffee shop, does that mean some weirdo with a laptop is going to write a story about me? Maybe. But what happens is you're writing and you're trying to think of ideas, and what would this character say? How would this relationship play out? And then people come into the coffee shop and you can observe their dynamics. And if you were at home, you would only see the relationships you already know. But in a coffee shop, in a public place, then you see families come in. You see couples sit down together to eat, to chat. So I wasn't sticking my nose in anybody's business, but sometimes you see couples sitting down together. And it can be sweet in a wide variety of ways. After a while, you pick up signs of when a couple is on a first date. There's nervousness. There's a little bit of familiarity. They've connected. They've chatted. Maybe somebody has introduced them. But there isn't enough familiarity, so they're asking the most basic questions. And they're testing, is there a connection here? Is there the capacity for romance? And it's sweet. They both want something to happen. And symbolically, this could be the beginning of a family. There could be generations of people coming from this first encounter. It's sweet, it's beautiful, could be historic, or it could be nothing. They might never speak to each other again. And sometimes you can almost tell which one is which. Or you see an older couple come in, and this is the thing they do. They know each other's stories, but they still laugh. They come in out of... They have many options. They live in apartments full of other people, but they're going to sit down together. And they already know what each other wants to order, but they're having a nice evening together, and it's sweet. But somewhere in the middle, there are awkward conversations. I remember one time I was sitting, and I could overhear a conversation, and I forget how it ended, which either means... I forget things, that's not a big deal. Or maybe I left, or maybe I just felt so guilty for listening that I didn't listen to the rest of it. But this couple was together, there was familiarity, this wasn't a first date at all. And they were talking, but not really, and then the woman looked up and said to the guy she was with, okay, like, what are we doing? Like, how do you see me? Who am I to you? And I was paying attention at that point because there was a lot in that question. All right, she wasn't just making conversation about a movie they had seen. She wasn't just talking about plans of what they were going to do on the next weekend. She had been thinking about their relationship. It had been weighing on her. She wasn't feeling validated. She wasn't feeling convinced that this was a thing. So she wanted to know from him, is this going to be a thing? What do you even like about me? She asked. And he paused. And I knew he should have paused. But he paused a little bit too long, and she said, is it a hard question? It shouldn't be a hard question. And I identified with him enough, and yeah, it is a hard question. Because we would all, if we could, if you could just pause the scene and pull the guy aside and say, listen, buddy, this is what you have to say, and this is what you're not supposed to say. It's a heavy question. Listen, she wants validation. She wants you to say that she is pretty, but don't say that first. Don't emphasize that. Don't make it sound like that's the only reason you're with her, because that says something about the relationship. So what's he supposed to say? We all know. We all know what we would want to hear if it was us asking the question. Right? Because that first date couple, if one of them would ask the question, then that could be a superficial conversation. Right? If a couple is on a first date, it's a very natural thing to say, oh, what made you want to go on a date with me? And then you can say, I saw your picture on the phone, on the app. I just wanted to get to know you better. You're captivating. You have magic eyes. You can say all those things on a first date. And then the older couple that I mentioned, one of them could ask that. They would already both know the answer, but they just want to hear it again. Honey, what do you like about me? Then you can talk about all the things that you do, all of the things that you have done, all of the sacrifices that you have made for each other. And it would be beautiful, and it would be sweet, and it would be a testament to the strength of that long, enduring relationship. But there's so much more pressure on that at that in-between time. And so this is the part that I don't remember. I don't remember what he said. It could be because he looked up and said, listen, let's have this conversation somewhere else. There's people around. That weird guy with a laptop might be writing this down. Right? But we know what he should have said. He should have said something like, I'm happier when I'm around you. He should have said something like, you challenge me. You make me a better person. You ask good questions. You say interesting things. You say funny things. You laugh when I say funny things. I can't wait to see where our life is going to end up together. If that guy had said that on the first date, it's too much. Right? On the first date, if he said anything about, I hope we'll have kids together one day, he's not getting a second date. Right? That's a little too much too soon. We have to build up to that. And on the last date, there aren't going to be more kids, right? The future looks sort of clear of what it's going to be. We're going to continue to be good grandparents. We're going to keep working this out and driving each other to doctor's appointments, all of the things. We know where it's going to go. But in the middle, they don't know, and it's awkward, but it could still be beautiful. Right? This is nothing, and it could be something really big. This is something already really big, and it came from nothing. But this thing, it's something. It could get bigger. It could become nothing. So much was hinging on that answer, and maybe that's why he didn't want to give the answer in public. Jesus is sitting there talking to his disciples, and he's asking the same question. Who am I to you? And Peter gives the superficial answer. Peter gives the first date answer. Right? Peter says, Jesus, we're just excited to be with you. We're just like when we're together with you, everybody looks at us. And right, it's this superficial answer that shows he's not really paying attention. So then Jesus explains in this last story the answer that the disciples should have given in the story before. Right? The disciples should have said, Jesus, whoever you are, we're here for you. Wherever this is going to go, we are going with you. If you're going to be the teacher of Israel, we are going to be your students. If you are going to initiate a political movement, we are your cabinet. If you're going to be the healer of the nation, then we are the doctor's assistants, and we are going to bring you whatever you need. Wherever this goes, we're with you. There are answers that are weird in some situations, but are entirely appropriate in others. And so sometimes our relationship with Jesus is a lot like Peter. It can be a little bit superficial. That sometimes, I'm a Christian. That's a label I wear. That's the jewelry I wear. That's the team that I'm a part of. Just so people know. And if anybody threatens my Christian freedom, if anybody makes fun of my group, then I'm going to stand up for myself. And, that was what Peter was ready to do. But Jesus wanted something different. Jesus wanted something deeper, something more long-lasting. And so we come to church to fellowship and to grow in our understanding of who Jesus is. And in some ways we come into church and Jesus says to us, okay, who am I to you? And it's a challenge, and it's a reminder of who we can be to Jesus. So, for Jesus to say as a first date answer, okay, if you want to do this, you got to carry your cross. That's going to scare away a lot of people. But at the end, that's obvious. Yeah, we've been carrying our cross, Jesus. But for the disciples who still have a lot of kingdom work ahead of them, for the crowds who are invested, who want to be there, they need to know everything hinges on this. You're here, you're excited to be with me, you're attracted to what the kingdom has to offer, that's great, but this is what it means. This is what it's going to cost. And many of us are here because other people were carrying the cross. Many of us are here because other people brought us here through a process of self-sacrifice and internal growth. So, we ask ourselves this question regularly. Who is Jesus to us? There are lots of answers around us. But Jesus wants us to know. Whatever your answer is, are you ready to carry the cross? Are you ready to do the work? Are you ready to put work into reconciliation? Are you ready to lift others up that society has pushed out? Are you ready to show love where the world around you isn't showing love? Are you ready to do the work? Because if you are, then you're a part of the team. And if you're not, you might only be seeing trees. You have more to see. So may our eyes be opened to what the kingdom has for us. May we be strengthened and able to carry that cross into the world around us so that we can live out the kingdom and participate in the relationship that Jesus has invited us to.